Hey, Scott, thanks for joining us today. This is where you're getting started. Give us why'd you get into sales?
Why did I get into sales, Brian? Is such a good question. I got into sales because I have always wanted to start my own company.
Yeah.
From day one, I failed at kind of computer science. So I couldn't take the engineering route. And I had an amazing professor at Princeton say, hey, if you want to get into sales, if you want to start your own company, go learn sales. It is the
Yeah.
number one thing every entrepreneur can learn, whether you're selling to your investors, your employees, your customers. And so I have been on this perilous journey for the past 10 years.
Yeah. Hey, what's your parents think?
Father is actually a been in sales his whole life,
Really?
entrepreneur. So there was a lot of push towards sales career, and mom should have been in sales. She's a natural,
Oh,
natural.
you're kind of an anomaly. Great education, right? Popped right off your LinkedIn profile. Because the natural thing that pops into my mind is then why sales?
Yeah,
Because that was a
yeah,
huge investment.
absolutely. So, I mean, it really comes back to what I had mentioned in the beginning of
Getting
kind of why I got into this. I think a lot of folks graduating from a Princeton or a similar organization
yeah.
would shun a sales career. I think that's changing though. I work with a lot of alumni and folks from our team, and there's a great innovation center there, and you're seeing a lot more folks say, "Hey, let's not go the investment banking, consulting route. Everybody wants to get into startups now. It's like, well, what are you going to do in startups? you know?
Right. There's only one CEO role
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
taken. And how'd you like it when you first started?
I hated it. I very much questioned everything.
Well,
It
that's it. Because
was
it is orthogonal to kind of the educational route.
absolutely, there's no, I mean, if you look at universities today, business schools today, there are very few, sales majors
Right.
or, anything. I mean, you're starting to see a lot more stuff come up around entrepreneurship,
Yeah.
but that's why I'm a huge fan of what Mark Roberge is doing.
Yeah.
And, he started teaching a great course over at Harvard Business School, which is one of the first like sales, and it has marketing, of course, go to market, but really focusing on kind of the tactical things that most MBA students had never thought about.
Right. Yeah. They're taught, product market fit, TAM, all the acronyms that gone wild, the glamorous side of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the real world.
Exactly.
The
And
market
that's,
just doesn't sit out here. Oh, you got a product, we've got a match. That's not
yeah,
how it works.
exactly. Products are supposed to sell themselves, right?
Yeah, that didn't happen, did it?
No. Now there's, obviously there's a lot of different flavors of sales, right? And so where I started to kind of focus on was more of that enterprise B2B sales cycle, because I
Yeah.
really felt like as a salesperson, you can add a ton of value through that process. You're not just taking orders.
Right.
You're not, just checking off the box. And I love when, a few companies ago, I was working with a company called Catalent, helping them break into and disrupt basically the Fortune 500 consulting market. And one of the things that became very apparent as we were working with these big organizations is, oh my gosh, I can actually start to problem solve at the organizational level for big companies out there like Shell, AB InBev, Boeing. And that is something that most people don't think about with sales.
Right.
I like to think it's organizational problem solving.
And so what business or what type of sale did your dad do? Because I'm sure there was some osmosis going on there.
Yeah. So he a number of kind of started out selling solar panels back in the 1980s, door to door.
So it was B2C.
Yeah, very much B2C. And then he started moving into um, actually like Blockbuster franchise, and ended up kind of franchising that. And so it was still very B2C. It was actually a few mentors in my life, including that professor, that really started to guide me towards B2B. I always like to say, like, and this might not be right, but in B2C, I like to think that marketing is king or queen, whereas
Pretty
in
much.
B2B, I like to think sales is king or queen.
Definitely. Right. Well, no one's going to see an ad and change the way they do business.
Right.
You'll
Right.
see an ad and get interested in a car, a solar panel, a new way of doing things.
Exactly.
But to change a company takes time. You have to talk to a lot of people. Now, how about the hard part of sales, the rejection, the grind,
Oh yeah, the cold calling.
all the stuff? I mean, because when you do really well in school, it's take a test, perform the test, do a paper. It's a knowledge-based performance. Sales, it's a trust-based, it's a relationship-based performance. It's strategy. It's
Totally.
right.
I like to think, as there's a few thoughts kind of coming through my head when you ask that. I would say it comes back to my initial thought, which is I learned this early on of a belief that I have of PPA, power of a positive attitude. There's books, there's all sorts of literature around this, but it really came to the forefront with my older brother, who spent 12 years Navy special warfare, and how he was able to get through the grind of becoming a Navy SEAL is through PPA, right? And PPA isn't rose-colored glasses. I was just talking to a BDR last week about this. He hadn't booked like 4 meetings, and he was really stressed. And I was like, I get it, PPA. Let's find the opportunity in the difficulty, right? Not saying the world is great. It's saying, hold on, don't let those stressors, don't let that norepinephrine and that cortisol freak your brain out, and now you're in your lizard brain, right? You need to stay top down and that prefrontal cortex and really understand, okay, is this a fit? Should we continue the conversation?
And did you develop that in sales, or was that in school, or was that hanging around with your brother? Or
that was my own personal. I graduated.
desire?
Yeah, I graduated college, and a lot of my friends and classmates were going business school route and that. And to your point, I feel like the traditional way of learning didn't align with my brain, but learning is the most crucial thing I need to focus on. And so I really did kind of my own little coursework of like, okay, let's figure out how we learn, like how do brains work, like how do we start to think with our different systems. I was fortunate that I was really influenced by Daniel Kahneman, who's teaching at Princeton, and his book Thinking Fast and Slow, and that notion, which so many other things have been built upon, has really helped me understand like those basics, as well as I was fortunate enough to work, or I got introduced to a guy named Dr. Michael Gazzaniga, who was the person who discovered left brain, right brain. At that time, he had just released a new book. And I figured, okay, if I'm trying to learn, let's figure out how the brain learns. And so I was very fortunate to start there and then slowly move into a world where I understood like how meditation and exercise and things of that nature, and like these literally having positive thoughts, you can grow those areas in your brain.
Right. Yeah. And because you did well in school, but then sales was learning a different thing.
Totally.
Right.
And it's
books don't really help much.
No. I mean, they give you a foundation, a baseline, right? But then it's all about, sales is a performance sport. And I grew up playing sports my entire life.
Which ones?
So I ended up growing up playing football, hockey, and lacrosse, and then ended up playing lacrosse at Princeton.
Okay.
And that education that I had on the field was almost, if not better than the education I got in the classroom. and you start to see like things like going to do extra wind sprints afterwards, right? Practicing, like I guess you have practice
Repetition. Yeah.
tests, but like you don't practice behaviors or like motions or mental models. And that's where you start to do that in sports, right? And that, in my opinion, really applies to sales, obviously coaching as well.
Right. And I think too many reps think it's knowledge. Like, if I pass the sales test, I'll make my quota.
Right.
You know,
It's
because
it,
look at
it's a numbers game.
I mean, lacrosse. You throw a ball through the basket and you hit through the goal. Right. It's not a lot of knowledge. Right.
Right.
It's a lot of repetition,
Behavior.
hustle. Quick thinking,
Yeah.
and
And it's, you don't have that similar type of performance. And that's where I really, really started to embrace sales, is when, big meetings, you get a meeting with a chief strategy officer of AmerisourceBergen, which is the sixth largest company at the time. You head down to their fancy headquarters. It's all amazing. You're nervous. You got the butterflies in your stomach. It's a big, big deal. This could change the course of our company, not just like your quota.
yeah.
And nothing in school really prepares you for that. Whereas sports, right? Sports really starts to prepare you for that. You have a
Well,
sense of like how you can mentally prepare.
right, because school would teach you what to present. Sports teaches you how to
I love
present,
that.
and how the nuances, and that
Absolutely.
the 14th, 15th time you practice it is not a waste of time.
Right. And just the work ethic, right? It's so much about sales is like consistency. You have to do your outbound. You have to do your prospecting. Even if you have 6 or 7 deals you're about to close, if you take 2 weeks off from this behavior, it's going to impact your success.
Yeah. Because I
And it's
always thought,
similar to sports.
yeah, because this great sales is the merger of kind of the hustle and the working smart.
Mm-hmm.
The just doing the grind won't make you number one in B2B.
Right.
Might make you number, but I've never found the grinder to be the top rep. And being smart, you'll get the big deals, but not enough, maybe.
Right.
The
Yeah, I think that's spot on. You really have to have I think that there is knowledge in sales that you
course,
leverage,
right?
right? Like all the methodologies that you talk about on this podcast that I'm a huge fan of, like challenger customer, elements of Sandler, like things like that. Those are the tools in your toolkit. We have to know how to use them. You have to know which behaviors and which knowledge to access that specific time.
Right. And much like lacrosse, if you don't practice it enough, you're not going to have that ability at that moment that you need it.
Absolutely.
Right. Because you are running on the primitive brain at that time.
Right.
You can't do an analysis while you're running, weaving, getting a stick in the head.
Yeah. Totally. Yes, absolutely. But you also have to, like, there's to your point, the smart folks are also strategically thinking, how can I be the number one rep? Yes, I'm
Yes.
going to have to make all those cold calls. Yes, I'm going to have to run all these meetings and do follow up and make sure the admin is there. But hold on, is anybody sending, personalized cookies to Fortune 500 leaders as a way of standing out to get a meeting?
Yeah.
Right? Things like that we had success with a lot, like Catalan.
Yeah. Cool. And like, what were some of the pivot points that got you successful in the larger deals? Are you a top-down person? You bottom up?
Yeah, great question. So I would say both.
Yeah.
It starts with knowing your product and knowing the pain points that solves, knowing kind of the impact of the benefits of those things, and then really going out and making sure that you're targeting the right folks, especially if you're going after kind of bigger enterprise sales, right? You're only working a few big deals
Yeah.
at a time. And so making sure you're selecting that target is so crucial. Then when you're selecting that target, I always love to start top down. Start top down with appropriate messaging, obviously more strategic, operational, and then kind of tactical when you get into the weeds with some of the more junior folks.
Yeah, I got to imagine with the things that you were selling they feel the pain that you solve.
Yeah. And I would say I am not afraid to leave money on the table in in these big enterprise deals. Like one of the the old notion of like land and expand strategy,
Yeah.
especially in enterprise, I think it's so crucial. And I think you have a lot of sales leaders say either you get full list price or not worth our time.
Well, certainly because a lot of products, if you try and get the enterprise deal on the first try, the likelihood of it going through is diminished greatly.
Yeah,
If you get a pilot project, adding more to it because you've already got the paperwork done, you've already got the
absolutely.
technical decision done, you just got to get the implementation done.
I've always said that the bigger the enterprise, the more risk averse they are, and the folks that you're
Right.
dealing with are, right. They're not working at a startup taking a high risk, trying to be, get 10x every year. Like
Yeah.
if they just improve 10% year over year, they'll climb that corporate ladder. But if they bring in a product that fails in what, some way, shape, or form, that jeopardizes their career.
Yeah.
And so I've always found that land and expand is able to reduce that risk factor, especially working with like an unproven startup, which is what I've done my whole career.
Yeah. Well, you're at a pretty good company now, right? So give us a sense of the size of your deals, who you go after, what your process is.
Yeah. So I started working at Lattice in November of last year, and I could not love Lattice anymore. I've been just so impressed with, of course, the product, which is number one kind of product in this space, but really more importantly, like the leadership and the culture, right? And as part of that, like how that leadership and culture is going to help me to kind of get to where I want to get to. The where we focus, so we focus on selling to really HR leaders, a people management platform that includes performance management, engagement, and employee development. And I would say that deal sizes so far they've ranged from $80,000 ARR all the way up to, I think I won like 169,000 ARR.
So
I'd say
that's a
average,
tough
yeah.
department, right? Because it's not a profit center.
Right, right.
They're
That
not
is
change agents, right?
no. It's so spot on. It's funny. Um, Mark Roberge's counterpart professor at Harvard Business School, and I told him about this opportunity. He said, "Well, why would you go do that? HR is so disempowered. I don't care what all these talent people say. Like they, they're not a sales leader. They're not, they're not.
Right.
They don't have traditionally a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Now, I do believe that is changing, and I think in the past year, you're starting to see, holy moly, like talent always has been so crucial, but now you don't have to live 20 miles from where an office is of your company that you want to work for. Meaning power has shifted from the employer to the employee, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And therefore, people leaders, HR leaders are now increasingly valuable. The trick is connecting the dots.
Well, you got to find somebody who has that mindset because,
yes,
right? I mean, nobody went to Harvard Business School to become an HR leader, right? It's just,
right.
It attracts a certain type of person with a certain skill set and political ability.
Yeah, and honestly, it's even going above that. It's looking at the CEO.
Yeah.
Does the CEO invest in their people, or do they say they invest? Right? What is their track record for the past year around investing in people initiatives, systems, anything of that nature? Because you can pretty quickly get a sense of, are they aligned with like our ideal customer profile today?
Right. And if they're not, do you just deprioritize them, or do you still go after them? Or
If it's pure outbound, I will
yeah,
deprioritize them.
yeah,
Absolutely. If it's inbound, I
yeah.
will
Give it a
really
shot.
focus on kind
Right.
of qualifying pretty hard. And it's,
Yeah.
I've really never been in a position that I've worked at for a market leader. I've always worked for like the scrappy startup that's trying to disrupt, the 800-pound gorilla. And so it actually has been quite wonderful to really take an approach with some of these inbound leads of why should we be talking? There
Yeah.
are 3,000 other customers right now that are using Lattice. I've got 4 other people that want to talk today. You know,
Right. Is it
like,
education? Is it
yeah,
interest?
DQ pretty early.
Yeah. And where do you want to take your career?
I still want to start my own company. I
Yeah.
still absolutely. I was just saying. So one of the other really amazing things about Lattice is they have a fund that if anybody at Lattice wants to go start their own company, they will seed that individual or team. And I saw Lattice as an amazing way for me to really get a little more stability in my life after the past year. I had a kid, we bought a house,
Okay.
working for a startup with unknown kind of potential.
You've got
But
enough stress in
then,
your life.
yeah, sales, it's not stressful.
Yeah.
Again, the PPA, but really making sure that I can grow. And there's specific areas, both tactically sales, I think I can grow, but also from a leadership perspective. And what Lattice has in place today is beyond anything I've kind of worked at before. And so I really felt like this is a company that I can come in, make an impact, make some good money too,
Yeah.
and then start to develop those leadership skills, and then hopefully find that brilliant idea or founding team and go start
Hey,
a.
and when you do that, what role do you see yourself? Is it like CEO? Is it VP of sales? Where's your passion lie?
Oh, it's a great question. I've always said CEO because I've been, in my opinion, pretty much a generalist. Like I study computer science at Princeton. Like I can code. It's not very well. We really dug into like marketing. I love marketing. I love really understanding kind of copyright, and also really appreciate kind of the operational aspects of things. I'd say my biggest gap in that regard is more in the finance area, where I started to take a few like Coursera corporate finance courses. But it's amazing what you can learn, like the amount of like free and also paid for materials
Oh,
out there,
sure.
including podcasts like yours.
Oh, God. When I listen to parents or anybody complain about not getting into a great school, not being able to afford school, I go, you realize they're all doing it from their bedrooms right now.
Yeah.
And most of the people that they're getting the course have podcasts, have YouTube channels, have probably 80% of it either free or low cost.
Yeah.
Like Scott Galloway, where he's like, the course that you get at NYU, he's pretty much given away for free on his podcast and YouTube channel and his books.
Right.
But it
Yeah.
requires you to do the work. That's the difference.
Totally. And you're starting to see these like sales accelerators, right? You can come in, learn how to be a BDR, and put you in, place you into a company. And I think those across the board are going to exponentially increase. I think you're going to find that folks are going to say, why would I spend $200,000 on a liberal arts education if
Well,
I can go learn the certain skill sets that I need to pursue the career path that I want?
yeah. Well, that makes logical sense. But like you see, like in the Wall Street Journal, where people still have that bias against sales.
You
And
do.
let's face it, people aren't talking on the phone when they're teenagers anymore. So that is a foreign skill when you're in your 20s.
Oh, yeah. And if you think about it, I mean, sales, which, I kind of lump negotiation into sales.
Conflict, a little bit of tension.
Right. I mean, there is a concern how, I don't know if you've noticed this in your experience, Brian, but I've been amazed at how few people will pick up the phone today, not to like a cold call, but just like, hey, Brian, had a quick
Let's
question
talk. Yeah.
around what you're trying to do, right? It's all Slack, it's all email, it's all chat.
Text. Yeah.
And it's a lot of kind of the younger
Asynchronous.
generations. And I've always thought, like, how's that going to impact sales?
I think it is. I think it is right now because people are having kind of like a service mindset. And that's part of it, but you're not going to sell a big deal by being great at service.
Right.
you,
Right.
you
Everybody
might
can
get
do
a
that.
repeat. Right. We can do that. So I guess that, to find, I don't know what it's going to take to build those people up. I guess what typically happens is they get in their 20s and they start seeing what a house costs, what a car costs. They fall in love, they get married, they see what a kid costs. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden they're open-minded to doing these other things.
Well, that's the thing. We do mentoring with a lot of the guys on the current lacrosse team at Princeton, and I've been delightfully surprised at their openness to looking at a career in tech sales. Now, it's
Yeah.
specifically tech sales, but I think what they've noticed and they've recognized is you can make a ton of money. You can make as much as those consultants or investment bankers.
More.
I mean, that's what I try to tell them. I stay conservative,
They
right?
don't
Under-promise,
believe. They don't
over-deliver.
believe it. Because when I tell them that they don't believe it, and because I didn't go to a great school, but I was a programmer, became a
I
pre-sales
saw that
guy.
Northeastern.
Right. Then became a sales guy, and within 2 years, I was driving around with the CEO, Stanford MBA, Air Force Academy, A-level venture capital, and he goes, "You know what? You're making almost twice what I'm making."
I remember we walked through, there was an article that came out and I sent it to my mentee and it showed the top earners and like a typical kind of software organization. And it was like CEO, CFO, number one sales rep. And they're like, wait, what?
Right.
And you're just
not
cold calling all day?
guaranteed.
Are you cold calling all day or what are you doing? It's like, no. You're not cold calling all day. It's not Boiler Room. All these movies and pop culture have really
Right. And
given
I think,
sales a bad rap.
if you come out of Stanford, you might get funded. But coming out of most MBAs, even like the top 10, VCs are going to be like, come get some product market fit, some customers, and
Get
then
some
come back.
traction.
Get some traction. And
Totally.
all those things they need to learn, I watch on YouTube every day.
Right.
From people who have done it and people who are venture capitalists.
Yeah. I really feel like I hope that sales podcasts like yours help to highlight how amazing of a career I specifically think B2B enterprise software sales is.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, I really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
They can go to LinkedIn. That would probably be the best place. I think it's like Scott McKenzie 1.
Yep.
But thanks so much, Brian. It's been such a delight.